Hello, my name's Jack Ogg and I am the head gardener here at Yorkgate Garden.
Yorkgate Garden, owned by Perennial, the UK's only charity dedicated to helping everyone who works in horticulture and their families. That's anyone working with plants, trees, flowers or grass. If they have a problem, however large or small, they can pick up the phone to Perennial and know they will receive the help they need.
Which is a 1 acre arts and crafts style garden owned by Perennial, who is the gardener's charity. So the garden is set out into 14 garden rooms, or the old Yorkgate, the original Yorkgate, is set out into 14 garden rooms. And then since we have taken it over in the past 2 or 3 years, we've built a dry garden in the other side, in the new part of the garden in front of the cafe. And there's a woodland walk and various other gardens. There's an iris border pillar garden as well. So we've added to the site and made the site bigger. The different rooms of the garden all have a different feel, really. There's a white garden, there's a kitchen garden that supplies the cafe with lots of things, salads and vegetables and that sort of stuff, so that's very nice. The air miles of the vegetables to the cafe is about 2 meters to the back door of the cafe, so it's very nice. We've got a pinetum, we've got a orchard, or an old orchard, because there's only 1 apple tree, and I think you technically need 3 apples to make it an orchard, or 3 fruit trees. One of the most recent creations in the garden is Sybils Tropical Garden, and we were donated all of the plants, or most of the plants, for Sybils Garden by a family called the Morels, or Vickers, and they kindly donated about 2/3 of the tropical garden plants, and then I have added to and changed some of the planting in there in the 3 years that we've had it as a tropical garden. It was a nice garden. It was a cottage garden style feel, and it had a little semicircle of lawn. So it's changed dramatically in what it's become now. I refer to it as the Marmite garden because it's been a bit hit and miss with some of our regular visitors to the garden. When I first did it, I got some people didn't enjoy it and didn't really get where I was going with it, and now it's absolutely taken off and people love it. It's gone a bit mad this year. The plants have filled out a lot, so you can't really see individual plants so much, but that's technically the sort of idea. It's become a jungle, a dense fight through, which is nice, I think. Sybil was the mother of the Spencer family who owned Yorkgate. They bought the house in 1951, moved in 1952, and then it was a farm with a field around it, and they created the entire garden that you can see today. And there was the mum and dad, there was Sybil and Fred, and then their son Robin, who all lived in the house. And Fred and Robin were surveyors by trade, so they were not gardeners. They just did it through the love of gardening, and they created this wonderful garden that everybody can walk around today. It was called, Sybil actually called it Sybils Garden, and originally it was the second kitchen garden when there was the 3 family members living on site. And then it got redesigned by a garden designer called Alistair Baldwin, and that's how it was for a number of years, and then we changed it to this tropical garden. So yeah, it's been known as Sybils Garden for quite a while, and it's just the style of the planting that's changed. I did plan on eventually creating a tropical garden here at Yorkgate somewhere, and we ummed and ahed and wondered about and decided where it would be. We got donated the plants, and then it kind of spurred us forwards to create the garden because we needed to put them somewhere, and that felt like a good room to do it in. Sybils Garden obviously has a path that goes all around the outside, so it was a journey already and enveloped you through the garden, and you could take that whole path all the way around the outside, which was nice.
So Jack, where are we now in Yorkgate Garden?
This is the paved garden, and it consists of a rockery, and then we've got a gravel garden where we've put verbenas and grasses and a soft feel. We've also interplanted it with Aeoniums, and the Aeoniums in here are undulatum, and we've got a few others that we've mixed in, a few species Aeoniums that I've grown from seed. One of the most frequently asked questions that I get here is, are our Aeoniums in the ground in pots and planted out in their pot? And we don't. They're all lifted out of the flower bed in the succulent house and planted bare root directly into the ground. And since we've been doing that, I've found they've grown 10 times better, and they seem to love their summer holiday of being planted directly in the ground, and they grow loads better.
And where are they kept over winter?
Well, all of the ones that are planted in the ground, we lift them up bare root, and they get healed in or planted into a very thin flower bed in that succulent house, so they never see a pot in their life. Basically, they go from this ground to the ground in the greenhouse for the winter. The little potted succulents stay in their pots and go on the bench and get jammed up very tightly in there.
Brilliant, let's take a closer look.
Great stuff. This is our mini succulent house. So this is where all of the big Aeoniums that are planted out in the ground and all of the tender succulents that we have in pots around and about the garden on display all come in for the winter, and they all get jammed in here, and you can barely move in the winter. They all get forced into this one very miniature greenhouse. The big Aeoniums that we use as bedding that get planted out in the garden and are all bare root planted in the ground all get forced into this very small bed in the greenhouse. So it's about 1.5 feet deep, and I can plant all of the plants in the ground. So it makes space in here, makes better use of the space in here. It's still pretty chocker, but it's good. I grow quite a few different things in here. It's not just cactuses and succulents that people would necessarily know. I really like stapeliads, or plants in the Apocynaceae, so carrion flowers. There's a few different ones. They have big, meat-smelling, starfish-shaped, hairy flowers, so they're not for everybody's taste, but I really like them. I think they're very interesting plants. On a trip to, I think it was Lanzarote or one of the Canary Islands, I noticed that there were Aeoniums and Echeveras growing as weeds in the roofs of people's houses. So I came back, and as a bit of an experiment, I took some cuttings and rooted them, then took all the soil off and wedged them into some of the cracks in the wall, and they've been growing in there for probably about 4 years now. They grow slower and more compact than they would if they were in a flower pot or in the ground, but they've all survived pretty well. They even do what they would naturally do in the Canaries, and they go dormant for the summer and make a really tight rosette, and all of their winter leaves fall off. And then in the winter, they expand back out and look fantastic again. We don't grow Aeoniums how they would naturally grow in the UK. When we plant them in the ground, they keep on to all of those leaves and they look really full and lovely. But in the Canaries, in that dry, extreme environment and the poor soils, they all kind of close up and make almost a rosebud looking rosette. And that's what these Aeoniums have done in the wall for me here. So it's an exciting way it was a bit of an experiment, and it's paid off quite well for me. So we're in the Mediterranean garden now. This garden is a Peter Corn inspired Mediterranean sand garden. So it varies from about 2 foot of sand to about 5.5 foot of sand at the back. And all of the plants in here have to really kind of struggle for survival growing in the sand, and they grow more compact and tighter and neater, and they don't need staking, more like they would grow in the wild if they were growing. We do grow some regular, well, what people would think of as regular garden plants, some echinaceas. We've got Echinacea pallida in here, and lots of eryngiums, different sea hollies, and they all grow really tight and really compact, and they don't grow really tall and fall over and collapse. So they grow how they would do in the wild. So it's quite an exciting project for us really, and we can do some real serious gardening and horticultural experiments in here and see what does well. We've also found that we're managing to get away with some plants that are possibly a bit more tender. So plants, obviously Agave montana is pretty tough, but we've found some slightly more tender agaves have survived because of the free draining nature of the sand. And we're going to work more with that. We're going to keep trialing things and keep experimenting and see what survives, a standard Yorkshire winter with super sharp drainage at its feet.
So although Yorkgate has many exotic and interesting plants dotted throughout the many different smaller gardens within the whole garden, it's really the exotic garden that I want to have a good look around. So let's have a tour around this very special area.
So one of my personal favourite combinations that I've done in Sybils tropical garden here is this rainbow chard, which is a standard garden vegetable, and this Pelea insolens, which is a new one for me. It's in the Urticaceae, so the nettle family, and I love that leaf. It's a gorgeous leaf, and then a really dark, sort of purpley red petiole and stem on the plant. It does flower, makes a little kind of white, nettly looking, raceme type flower. Not the most interesting thing, but that leaf is absolutely fantastic. And then above it, I have a plant that people keep complaining at me about, thinking it's Himalayan balsam, but it's Impatiens balfourii. And then above that one, there is Salvia convertiflora with tiny little red flowers in really tall spikes, but a wonderful plant. Bit of an unpleasant smelling leaf, but for that flower structure and for that big shrubby meaty salvia plant, it's well worth growing. This is another lovely Impatiens species that we've got here. This is Impatiens sodenii. It's quite often you see the pink form available, but this is obviously the white form, and it's got that lovely kind of pinky purpley marking to the centre of each petal. It's a nice little plant. Not hardy. I have to lift it and store it for winter, but incredibly easy from cuttings. Cut them off, stick them in a glass of water, and they root. I grow a few different kinds of begonias in the garden, but one of my favourites is this Begonia Pinatafida, and it's completely hardy. The first couple of years I grew it, I mulched it and piled leaf mould over the top of it and panicked about it, and it's been absolutely hardy. The past couple of years I haven't bothered even protecting it in any way, and it seems to be quite happy as just a garden perennial. It does have a very nice small white flower, but it's held underneath the foliage so you don't see it. But for that leaf alone, I would highly recommend growing it. This is another one of my favourite combinations here. I've got Sauromatum venosum, the voodoo lily, and then in front of it I have this Colocasia galleongonensis, or however you pronounce the name of this plant, and it's proved completely hardy for me. It runs about with stolons, and then quite excitingly, the first time for me, it's producing a big flower, the standard sort of aroid flower with the spathe and spadix, but this time around it's got a yellow spathe and I believe a yellow spadix, but it's not opened yet, so I don't know, but I like that combination. Another begonia that we grow here is this tender begonia. It's Begonia fuchsioides, so fuchsioides means like, so it's fuchsia-like flowers on a begonia, and it confuses people really, because it does look a lot like a fuchsia, but it's a begonia. Very nice, very easy from cutting again. I root it in water and plant them out. So we're lucky enough to have 7 full-size tree ferns in Sybils Garden, and I like a tree fern as much as the next person does, as much as the next tropical plant grower does, but they're a big column of brown with fronds on the top, so I've decorated them, added to them with different epiphytes. So we've got about 4 or 5 different types of Tillandsia bergeri, and the Spanish moss, the standard Spanish moss that is Usneoides. And then also I had a bit of an experiment. I took some cuttings of this Impatiens arguta Blue Dream, rooted them in water and stuffed the rooted cuttings into the fibrous trunk of the tree fern, and they've grown away quite happily, growing as epiphytes and clinging onto the trunk of the tree fern. We protect our tree ferns. I wrap them with fleece, and then one of our volunteers has very kindly made me some winter jackets, a bit like a duffel coat, but they're made out of old Hessian coffee bags, so they've still got the Colombian writing on and the pictures of the coffee on the front, and they do up with little wooden toggles around the front of them, so they're an attractive thing in their own right. All of the tree ferns in Sybils Garden, I have a drip feed running up the back of them, so I've hidden it up the back of the trunk, hopefully so you can't see it in all the tree ferns, but that just drips in, and I set that going every couple of days or so to just have a constant drip for a number of hours at a time.
So now let's enter the exotic garden here at Yorkshire Garden, and as we can see, we've got some familiar plants, including the onset bananas up there. We've got lots of interesting flowering annual and returning perennial plants, including lots of Impatiens. We've got the annual nasturtiums to add a bit of late summer colour, because we're well into September now. We've got some Aeoniums there, Pyracantha, Euphorbias, Eucomis. And these Eucomis, although they're finished flowering, is bicolour, it's still got architectural form with these seed pods forming, so still really interesting to have in the garden. And then there's the flowering Eucomis of Poliventii and sparkling burgundy around here. Here we have a plant related to Himalayan balsam, but it's not. This is a different form and it's much more daintier, but it does have those explosive seed pods that will spread about. Bees love this as well. We've got a nice ginger here, we've got greeny eye. And a vegetable in the exotic garden, but it does add some interest. We've got this Swiss chard with the red midrib. Looks as exotic as an aroid to me, so it does fit in with this style of planting. And up here we have a wonderful salvia with its rusty red flower heads, adding a good strong splash of colour this late in the season. Around here we have this wonderful returning sort of shrub. It's a half hardy to hardy shrub with its wonderful architectural leaves. It will grow yellow daisy-like flowers, but it's the leaves that it's grown for. And they're nice and large, as you can see, compared to my hand. So this is a plain green form, but if we move around we can see that there's a purple form as well. So it's a bit smaller leaves, but if we look under the leaves you can see it's a nice strong purple colour. Wonderful plant. The purple one's tender compared to the straight green form, but it's still excellent to have in the garden. It's well worth growing and planting out. Got a nice Sheffella here, umbrella tree, with a new flush of growth coming up there, and this will grow very tall in this part of the garden. If I just pan out, you can see we've got a yew hedge surrounding the garden, so it gives it lots of protection, ideal for these tender and exotic plants. More salvias here, wonderful purple colour, pinky purple. We've got the canna musifolias down here and other cannas surrounding this part of the garden. And what's a bit different from a lot of exotic gardens is the use of these Impatiens and these annuals to add lots of sort of delicate colour in between the big robust plants like the Musa baju and the bamboos and the cannas. Got a nice seating here area here. Red dragon, adding some height to this part of the garden. And some more musas, nice bananas in the background there. And grasses also for that architectural look at the back of the border. We'll just pan round. Got delicate Fagecia bamboos in this area that won't overtake and drown out the plants compared to the Phyllostaches that will run everywhere. And we'll just look back there. So this part of the garden, this exotic garden, is a circular area. So we'll carry on clockwise around. We've got to a cool lush corner now as we go past this bamboo, and we've got this nice ginger, this Hedychium forestii, looking very lush after a recent rainstorm. We've got the Fatsia polycarpa and the tree ferns here. Got Dicksonia antarctica. And some more lush foliage in this nice green relaxing part of the exotic garden. More tree ferns as we go around, and Schefflers here, beautiful architectural plants, and nice Japanese grasses that enjoy the shade and the lushness in this part of the exotic garden. And these are beautiful when the wind goes through them. It looks a bit like the ripples on the sea. And a bit of colour climbing up here. So we've got nasturtiums being trained up, a Scheffler, so this large umbrella tree that's very high up now, some Spanish moss up there as well. And we've even got over here on this old stump of a tree fern, we've got some pitcher plants that are growing outside for the summer. So these were brought in for winter, but I'll just zoom in and you can see those wonderful pitchers on this tropical Nepenthes. As we complete our circular tour, we can see more tree ferns with bromeliads growing on the trunks of those. And many more tree ferns in this part of the garden on both sides of the path. Very long, luscious fronds here as well, so these are obviously well tended and well watered. And I've just noticed on this Scheffler we've actually got a flower spray as well, so fingers crossed we might get some berries later on in the season. More Fatsias down there, Persicaria, hostas by the path as well. We'll go past the tree ferns and we'll just finish our loop around this quite magical exotic garden here at Yorkgate Gardens.